Welcome back to the World of Martial Arts podcast. I'm Kurt, and as always, I am joined by my better halves, Nathan and Mick, three halves to a whole. And we're going to chat a little bit today about the definition of really what MMA is, what the mixed martial arts are, or what it is. We recently did a conversation, or had a conversation about whether or not Bruce Lee was in fact the grandfather of mixed martial arts, whether he was really the defining pioneer that, is the UFC an outgrowth of his Jeet Kune Do. And in some of the internet forums, when we posted that, it brought up some good discussion from people in both the JKD community and the MMA community. And the prevailing response seemed to be that really comes down to how we define MMA. So we thought it'd be a good thing to dig into a little bit today. Mick, why don't you jump us off? You're somebody that I see as equally having time and tenure in the sport world and in specifically the Jeet Kune Do world. Where are you coming from on this?
Well, yeah, mixed martial arts is it's a bit of a poison chalice, really, because unfortunately now, years ago, if you talked about martial arts, it was like you do karate, you do kung fu, and that was pretty much it. And then obviously Steven Seagal with Aikido, and you're like, that would probably be about it, right? It was quite funny because judo was never ever seen as a martial art; it was seen as a sport, and that's why I've always looked at judo, and I'm quite jealous of them because they don't really have the politics in judo, because they're not as socially inept as most of us martial artists are, where we start arguing over political terms. But yeah, it's been a bit of a dodgy one for me, because with Jeet Kune Do, I get it all the time where people say, "So what is it that you actually teach?" And I could go down the route that it was Bruce Lee's very personal philosophy on martial arts, but we're going to use that on your own personal development, which is quite a mouthful, even me saying it. Well, I just go, well, I basically teach mixed martial arts. And then they go, what, like, are you a black belt in UFC or something? And then that absolutely just, you look at it, you go, I'm going to be really, really, really controversial here and say, I'm tangentially connected, to Guru Dani Santo, the greatest martial artist of our generation. And then with one sentence, I get broken down into just like being some charlatan who teaches, you teach mixed martial arts. I've seen that once. And oh no. So it's a bit of a nightmare, because for me, especially, I look at mixed martial arts, the sport, MMA, the same way that I look at football. So you'd call it soccer, Kurt. But, it's like, like a really skillful round football game that we play. But,
Sure.
but you know
Really
what I'm
skillful.
saying, right? Well, quite
a lot more running.
Paid millions. They get paid millions for doing it. So somebody's a mug. But, yeah, you know what I'm saying? But the thing is, I like football, but I hate the fans. And for anybody who's a fan of MMA who doesn't do martial arts, I equally despise you too, because I'm sorry, but it's the truth. It's like,
oh no, you're right. I mean, we've said before, the early days of MMA, when you used to go, you knew everybody in the crowd, everybody trained. And like half the guys in there would have fought on the previous shows. I remember going to one of Andy Jardine's shows where an opponent hadn't turned up, and someone got up out of the crowd, grabbed his shorts out of the car, and got in there and fought. That kind of stuff happened. But it has changed a lot. I know one of my students was at a UFC once, and everyone was booing, and he turned to the guy next to him and said, "Why are you fucking booing?" And the guy went, "Oh no, everyone else is." And that kind of tells you a lot about like the attitude of the guys at the shows. I think when we're talking about MMA, obviously I see MMA now just as the unified rules. It's just a very specific sport that we have now. I like all the variations that there were back in the day. I'm sure we all watched Pride and Shooto and all these different things. And I like the different rule sets, but it does seem to be very condensed into one now. But I don't think there's really that much. Like, I've heard mixed martial arts used as a term for some of the kind of things that you do and I do sometimes, where you train different things, but that's also cross-training. But like, if you're cross-training or you're trying different things, you might do weapons, or you might do a soft art, you might include other stuff. I don't really think there's like a term that people use that much for that. Like, but the cross-training seems to have dropped like out of use, and mixed martial arts seems to have kind of overtaken everything, but it's quite a specific sport. I mean, how do you
use cross-training?
Yeah, I was gonna say, how do you define what you do, and do you see it have any relationship to the term mixed martial arts, or
me personally? Yeah. I mean, I specifically actually use like there's a shirt right there. It says martial art cross training right on it. Um, and it's funny. I've gotten a little bit of flack for that from people, more in the sense of like, well, technically what you're not cross training, you're blending, and so which makes me chuckle. I'm like, I could put, tactical high five club, and people, well, technically it's like, it doesn't really matter what we call it. Somebody's going to have an opinion about it.
But that's what I
MMA.
mean. I don't think there is a really good sound, because cross training is you go and train in a different discipline, but we do blend, we do play with stuff. Like I don't.
Right.
Like it's
but like for me, it's cross training as a JKD person. It's cross training in service of a more singular objective, though, and that being like, it's singular is maybe a difficult word, but it's total martial artistry is how I would think of it. You know what I mean? Inside, outside, physically, mentally, whatever, spiritually and emotionally, if that's part of the factors for you, the way that you're conceptualizing the training, what your own personal goals are, what your own standards are, that kind of thing. And so whatever I'm training in, it's in service of that same agenda. If I'm doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and I'm doing Kali Strisimo from the Filipino martial art, I'm doing them for the same reason, so I'm not doing them. They're still part of what for me feels like a JKD. We usually just call it the JKD filter that you see things through. It's the way that you're interpreting and experiencing martial art. It's the door you walk through to get to martial art. And so for some people, I think MMA is that. It's the first door they walk through, literally or figuratively, because they saw it on TV. A lot of kids play basketball because, I mean, I played basketball when I was little because I love Michael Jordan, not because I was terrible at basketball. Awful, but Michael Jordan was awesome, so I played, so I think that's the door people walk through. But I think once you're on the mat for a while, you realize, well, there's a lot of differences in these. MMA now has to at least have air quotes around it. We're talking about a sort of more formulaic, very public, often professional sport. But for me, the only time that I use MMA, and I never really care if it's confusing, I guess, just because, again, I think people have opinions about terms either way, is I have my own students always say, well, just call it MMA. And I'll tell them, well, technically MMA is this thing over here, and we're sort of adjacent to that and informed by it. And they go, that's cool. But when I tell my friends, hey, they should come with me because they're going to like this, and my friends say, what do you do? I say MMA. Because they don't care. They're not going, well, is it technically MMA or is it, you know what I mean? Like that in those conversations, it's so irrelevant. And suddenly I'm the only person in the gym that's going, it shouldn't be a big deal, but it is. And everyone else is going, I guess it's a big deal then because it wasn't before, Well,
to be honest, even someone who's trained MMA fighters and runs classes of MMA, people coming in saying they want to do MMA don't even know what they want. They don't know what they're talking about anyway. Right. So, right. I find that really interesting. Like you mentioned earlier, the distinction between judo, Mick, and martial arts, and it being more of a sport. One of the things I see with MMA, it's kind of brought all the combat sports out the shadows together. So everyone's like, oh, combat sports are all together now. So people boxing and Thai, when people are into MMA, they will talk about boxing and Thai boxing and jiu-jitsu and wrestling and judo and all these different combat sports, whereas people before might have been a fan of one of them, but not really know much about the other one or been aware of it at all. And I find now people will watch fights from boxing and a jiu-jitsu match and an MMA fight. So I think one of the things it's done is brought all them out, but I find it's very surface. So, Rick Young, and I remember being at a Rick Young session and Rick saying, from a JKD perspective, when he goes into different arts, he wants to go really, really deep into it and then do the whole absorb what is useful and just, and all that kind of stuff. But I find because people see MMA as like just the current sport, it's under the unified rules. So when they go and look at the different combat sports, they only take out just enough to do MMA. They don't go and see if there's something deeper in there. I don't know what your experience of that is.
No, you hit on something there. Just when Kurt was talking, when you were talking earlier, for the guys in America, if you've never been able to get hold of these columns, please do. They've got to be somewhere on the internet. But you mentioned Rick Young. Rick Young is the quintessential mixed martial artist. He is the man. Like, he's still my hero now, and I embarrass him when I say it. He still inspires me to this day. He inspired me as a 16-year-old kid when I used to read about him going off to train with Danny Nosanto and working on a building site and being a postman and doing 2 jobs and everything. But it was always, I always found it very insightful that his column was always cross training. It was never ever mentioned mixed martial arts or anything like that. He always mentioned it was cross training, and I liked it at the end because he always signed off with train safely, train intelligently. And then I'm like, if you've ever met any of those guys, they don't do either of those. You know what I mean? Like 95% of the guys in that game at the time didn't anyway. But yeah, it's a real funny thing. I think it's been dumbed down to a degree. So the general populace now, as you were saying there, Nathan, I know guys who have never put on a boxing glove, they've never rolled around the floor, but they're quite insightful when they know what they're looking at when they see a fight now. So, and you can't judge someone on that because I can't score a goal like Cristiano Ronaldo, but I know what a good goal looks like. But I think it's maybe just like the martial artist in me and the old man in me that turns around and like, but you shouldn't really have that opinion, mate, because you haven't paid for it. You haven't had your nose broken. You haven't got a cauliflower ear. You've never been armbarred, And I think that's me being a bit prissy, to tell you the truth.
I know. We all know what you mean there. We all hear people say stuff and you just roll in your eyes. But I do think the level of analysis because of MMA has jumped up a lot. Like obviously YouTube's a big part of it as well. That's grown the level of analysis about combat sports. But you see guys like, obviously, you know Dan Hardy as well. I mean, Dan's analysis is pretty much the best in the game. It's absolutely fantastic. You look at his breakdowns, hours and hours of breakdowns of fights leading up to a UFC and afterwards. Although now obviously he's commentating for Cage Warriors now. His contract's kind of gone from the UFC for the moment. I think he'll be back. But I've noticed that level of analysis. People like share his videos a lot, talk about his videos a lot. Like I do think people are getting a bit more from MMA being a full contact sport, so you can't really hide much. And then there being a lot of fandom and analysis of it because it was an internet driven sport and it's kind of a fandom based sport. It's got really big. I think the general knowledge of MMA and combat sports and martial arts has grown. I always thought that the UFC games would help as well, because people do simulation, people do stuff for fighting, and I think the idea of playing a game where you're trying to get on top or you're trying to get past the legs or I'm trying to hit him, like it sounds silly, but I always felt that would have an effect, but I've not noticed it myself. But
Nathan, sorry to interrupt, but I have to have you on this. It's a bit of a sidebar, but it's sort of to do with mixed martial arts. I had a quite an in-depth conversation with a guy. It ended up being a bit of a heated discussion because he was one of these guys who trained for reality. And I was explaining to him that the average guy on the street now is super savvy. And I said, you can get a mooch out or a chav, or I think the term is a roadman. So I don't really want to offend any roadmen or sidemen who might be watching this. But these characters, they actually understand the importance of a guard game. They understand what an armbar is.
There was a video from last month in Leicester. I don't know if you saw it. A police officer tried to grab a lad in the city centre, and the lad lifts him up, double legs him, slams him, knee on stomach, and then runs off, leaving the police officer. And it was just easy. Just picked him up, dumped him, and he's obviously done a bit of training. Probably, I didn't recognise him. He's like no fighter or anything like that. But he clearly knew what he was doing. And yeah, there's a lot of that about now, way more than there used to be.
MMA, it's like just on that game alone. That game alone. I know myself when my youngest son is my go-to guy. Whenever I have to do a roundup on any MMA fights, me and Max watch them, and I say to Max, "What did you think?" And because Max will always see a lot more than I do, and it's not that he trains as much. First of all, he watches it from a fan's perspective, but he also plays the game. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're exactly right. It's for better or for worse, MMA is here to stay. And as we've said several times before, those Brazilians are wily individuals. They wouldn't have given away $1 billion sport if they didn't realize. They thought it was an infomercial. They thought it was an infomercial for jiu-jitsu. They never thought it was going to be up there with the NFL or, I remember looking at it thinking, do you think it'll ever overtake the WWE? I remember thinking if they did that, wow, how amazing that would be if Dana White was as powerful as Vince McMahon. And now you're looking at it, you're going, these guys have created a sport. And not only have they created a sport, but the UFC is synonymous, as you were saying about the unified rules, Nathan, for a new generation coming through, the only way that they'll find out about, like, say, Pride will be because they've got a UFC fight pass and they're going and looking at some of the older guys.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I remember watching Shooto, watching all these different shows, and then obviously, yeah, the UFC, took over WEC, took over Pride, took over Elite XC, took over Strike Force, folded them all in. So there isn't much variation anymore.
No.
I guess when we talk about MMA, UFC is MMA, and MMA, it seems to have had a big effect, but that's the thing, it's hard to define it and go, oh, it's just that sport, because you look at the cultural impact it's had and the impact it's had on martial arts and the discussions we have about it. And it's way wider than just the sport, I guess.
But there's a lot of things that we can clearly define and then also define or take note of the impact and the ripple effect that it's had. That doesn't necessarily influence how it's defined, right? Yeah. Because what's interesting is listening to you guys with the experience and the, I guess, perspective that I'm aware of that you have. While we're at face value talking about MMA can mean a lot of different things, and could it even be Jeet Kune Do, or could Jeet Kune Do be MMA, blah, 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 blah. The conversation you both just had was about the UFC and the sort of integrated blended sport fighting that we see on TV. So how quickly it goes from, without any of us thinking about it, that it could be any kind of cross training in martial art, to pretty specifically, we're talking about boxing, jiu-jitsu, judo, and Muay Thai. You know what I mean? Like this sort of classic things like that. And that undeniably at this point, it's interlinked, inextricably is the word, right? It's interlinked with UFC, with any of these other organizations. I mean, it seems like MMA is, if we're trying to define what that term means today, not how we could apply it in a different way, but really in a mainstream sense, it's definitely a sport. It sounds like it's propelled by consumerism, a lot of it, right? And they've managed to sort of commercialize and market the martial arts or pugilism or whatever, martial sports, combat sports. That's sort of, to me, I've always seen it as something running almost parallel to, as an example, Jeet Kune Do, as a more, martial art community center, like a version of this that's more of the martial art world than of the mainstream world out there, I guess.
That community distinction is a really interesting one, because obviously you talk about different JKD groups, and I'm sure there's competition between them, but you're trying to help each other and make that journey. Whereas different teams and different schools in MMA are competing against each other. Like, that's a very different attitude, isn't it?
Yeah. And, and by martial art community too, there's this sense of like I'm going to be awkward at any and every party I go to. So if I happen to bump into somebody at a party who does karate, I'm like, oh, thank God. I don't know anything about karate, but at least we're going to hang out now. Right. And maybe you guys or someone listening can relate to that. Like, oh, thank God. So it's that, like, I think that exists, in the martial art world. And I do think, because I've experienced this, that's not always the case if I find someone at that party who does MMA or who's an amateur or a professional fighter. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Like, and I start telling them, oh, I do Kali. And they're like, oh, whatever, dude. You know what I mean? Like, it's more of a, do you even spar, bro, attitude that I get in response to it. So those things, they're like cousins. They're related, but they're not quite the same thing. Some of the DNA is the same, but clearly they had different parents, right? Clearly they had different messages coming up. And so to me, like, one of the big things it comes down to, and I want to say it came up on the show, I want to say, Nathan, maybe you brought it up and I could completely be wrong. But the distinction between the fact that, like, Nathan, you were saying in the beginning, MMA competitions, the people in the audience were all martial artists. Everybody knew each other, and even when you go to smokers and stuff like that, to like local amateur stuff, that's what it is. It's just schools hanging out, getting to see each other. Maybe something kicks off in a parking lot, but otherwise it's just people know each other. This idea that MMA, in air quotes, used to be our thing, used to be the thing for martial artists. And then UFC got so big that now it belongs to everyone else. Just like you were saying, Mick, not everybody who loves watching football has ever played football or ever cares to. They just love picking their team and getting into it, And the same thing is true with MMA. It used to be ours, quote unquote used to be ours, and now it's everyone's, and that changes it. It just becomes a consumer driven sport at that point, which is cool, but it's quite a bit different.
Oh man,
Yeah,
you're making me sound hipster. It sounds like you're saying I was into it before everyone else was.
No. On the contrary,
Yeah.
and this is my opinion of it. Like, I loved the early stuff. I've said before, I love the mismatch stuff because it reminded me of video games or Bloodsport or something. It just really felt like it was an outgrowth of martial art pop culture that, maybe everybody liked the Karate Kid, but not everybody was obsessed with it. Some of us were. Everybody liked Bruce Lee, but not everyone was obsessed with him. And some people that changed their whole lives, So seeing those things develop in the 90s and early 2000s, it was exciting. You're like, oh man, this is, I played football, American football 1 year. I was terrible at it, didn't like it. I wasn't good at team sports. Oh, look at this as our thing. And pretty quickly, it's like, it's more of like a Vegas bro thing than anything else. The Affliction t-shirt generation started, and it went from there.
Yeah, but Kurt, what you've hit on something there, right? Which I've often said about when it got mainstream, and it's like Nathan said, I don't want to sound like a hipster, but yeah, I remember being at a Cage Warriors show and I was sitting on the same table as Ian Freeman, Dan Hardy. That was when Dan was still rocking the outlaw look, with the mohawk and everything. And he was the only guy I knew that had a mohawk that actually really good. It was when Paul McVeigh fought Neil McLeod. So we had the streaker come in.
Quick
really,
aside
really cool.
there. Have you seen the name of Dan's new picks thing that he's doing?
No.
It's now the outlawed picks.
Dan's nothing but timely. But the one thing I was going to say was, the minute something goes mainstream, I don't know if you boys know this, but I've never seen, it's a bit of a random thing, but when you see How I Met Your Mother, there's that classic line that says, nothing good ever happens after 2 a.m., which is the truth, right? And the other one is that I like is, I've never seen anything get improved in life by having more beer and pork rinds. So pork scratchings, and like you go to the UFC, and we went from where guys used to train, where you go there, and it's just some guy filling his face with pork scratchings, drinking beer, shouting, and he's got all the vicarious, like, so everything's being triggered in his brain through the violence. So he's getting, like, literally is like modern day bread and circuses. And what I'd like to ask, just if we're going to go back to what MMA is, me and Nathan enjoy the sport, as you know. Kurt, I know that you got a laissez-faire attitude towards it because you're a martial artist, and I mean that in the nicest way. So you got a laissez-faire attitude to to that sport. But how do you think that would inform, say if someone came into the gym and they were like, I want to do mixed martial arts, how would you want to find out what they use, what that defined, or would you just say?
So usually, because that happens all the time, it's a good question. I usually, depending on a few different factors, I'll usually ask them just what they mean by that. Or I'll ask them, have you trained before? Most times if somebody comes in and says they want to do MMA, if I ask, have you trained before, they'll say yes. And I'll say where, and they'll say mostly in my basement and stuff is usually the answer. Right.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm not trying to say that's everybody, but at least here that does tend to be, and like, okay, well then that's fine. Why don't you get on the mat? We'll, just get you started. But if it's somebody who seems like they're serious about it, I'll let them know, like, I have things I can give you that will help you build a foundation. If they're brand new, that will help you build a foundation, and things I can give you later on down the road that might help you develop certain parts of your game. But especially if they're young, I always make a point to tell them, like, you're still in your prime, or your prime is still in front of you. So I'm going to refer you out to a coach that's going to get you there, because it's just not my background, So I know I have something of value to offer that person, but especially a younger person who's, they're serious and they got their prime, to be like, well, I'm going to take $100 a month off this kid who's really trying to do something. I just think that's kind of foul. So that's usually my response to it. And I love, my thing that I always try to encourage students that I have who then get curious about maybe UFC, maybe they've never watched it before, they never cared, but now they've been doing martial art for a year and they started watching a couple fights, is, I like to watch it and be entertained, enjoy it, whatever. but to analyze it a little bit. Like there's one thing to watch it and go, man, did you see what he just did? That was amazing. And try to figure out, you almost want to rewind it and what was that? And look at where the pass was. And you're kind of breaking down the motions, and it's fascinating and it's enriching in that way. And that's different than like your analogy, Mick, just shoving, chips in your mouth or whatever, and just screaming whatever you're feeling judgmental about, right? So you're saying, oh, this guy's no good, but you're not really looking at anything. You're not investigating the substance of it. You just have an opinion, and that's fine. You're entitled to it, but there's really nothing interesting about that to me. So that's, if it comes up in my gym, that's usually my take, is if you want to be serious about it, I can help you find someone who's serious about it. And really, if what you mean is no, that I thought that's just what we're supposed to call martial art that isn't karate, then cool, come on in. We're going to do a bunch of fun stuff.
Yeah, you see, the one thing I've said several times before, and it's upset a few people, say they do actually believe that I've just drank the Kool-Aid for BJJ. And bear in mind, I have to be very careful here, because Nathan Leverton's probably the only guy I know who teaches a systemized approach to mixed martial arts where people progress. And I do mean that. But that's the truth. And when you got to remember, Nathan, I know a shitload of people who teach MMA, right? But you're the only one that goes, right, we start here and we work to this, right? Whereas 9 times out of 10, it's like, we'll do a bit of this, we'll do a bit of this, do a bit of this, throw it all together, see what sticks, right? And
well,
I've said
it's not so systemized anymore.
But it was, Nathan. But my whole take all the time, like, this is what I've said to so many people, is I know people who are dumb as you know what, right? And I've seen them start Brazilian jiu-jitsu and become quite intelligent. And then I've got friends of mine who have been really intelligent and done MMA. And I swear to God, you would not want to get stuck in a lift with them now, because, and I'm not saying that they've been bashed around the head, but it's almost like, it's like a devolution, because it's like, that worked great. It's like, the BJJ analogy is the best one, where you get the spazzy white belt comes in, goes crazy, but if I punch you in the head, that'll work. And I go, of course it'll work. You're punching me in the head, dude. You want to play Scrabble and I'm playing Cluedo. We're playing 2 totally different games here. And then you go, but you got to remember, I can still play Scrabble pretty fucking good as well. So that's when, the whole thing with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I don't like the dumbing down thing. Even especially in MMA, like we're seeing a new resurgence of very smart tactical striking now, which is winning fights. So instead of the big slug or getting into the clinch and the whole era of the dirty boxing, which always amused me, because it was like, what? So you're just wrapping the guy up like Jack Dempsey and punching him 4 times in the head. You want me to be impressed by that? Now when you look at guys like, especially Whitman, and you look at the way that guy, I swear to God, man, I know this is going to make me sound really, really lame, but it's like watching an orchestra being conducted. If you listen to that guy and the way he's coaching, my good God, it's like, God Almighty, dude. There's levels of understanding, and there's levels of understanding, and that's the great thing that I do see with MMA. We've talked about this before, Nathan, that where we get these cycles of development. And like, me and you were only talking about this recently, how it looks like we're coming into another evolution, especially in the striking, the timing, the understanding of like how, like, there's so much, like Kurt, you would love it. The baiting for the shot now. Some of the stuff that Whitman's doing is like crazy, like real next level stuff, Nathan, what do you think when you see this evolution?
Well, yeah, we've talked about it before, like the wrestlers developing all the different areas, and what's happening now a lot is you're getting guys with a wrestling background, and they're not trying to take people down. They're not even defending the shots that much. They're just doing lots and lots of striking. They're using that athleticism. There's lots of like switching stances and doing lots of different things and opening up the striking game, but because they can. And because I find the control of range is getting a lot better as well. So it's not like people just crashing in, throwing a couple of shots and then sprawling. They're really just dictating the range for long periods where the guys aren't even getting hold of them, and then actually just pinning them up against the wall for a bit and then coming back out and striking again, because it's rather than letting the person shoot on them, they're just kind of pinning them for a little bit and then bringing them out. There's definitely the striking in the last couple of years has jumped up massively, but it's really
how much of that do you think is just directly influenced by Steven Seagal? and his vast impact on the sport.
Well, he taught Lyoto Machida that Mayageri, and I've only ever seen Steven Seagal throw a kick once, and I swear to God,
he taught one of the country's like foremost karate authorities how to throw a kick. Right? Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if you know much about Lyoto Machida, but his dad was Japanese in Brazil, and he got a successful karate association.
And family's pretty good.
Talk
and
about
Aikido has no striking in that way. So that was the funniest part to me. It was like the only way that the Aikido guy is going to be doing that kick is if he's training MMA, and so he teaches an MMA guy. Okay, well let's see if we can actually do this. Can we force a definition? Right, Mick, we'll start with you. If you get 10 seconds or 2 sentences, something like that, you got to define what MMA is in your opinion today in 2021.
In an ideal world, it is the logical conclusion to Bruce Lee's idea of what Jeet Kune Do was. In reality, it's an absolute shit show. But that's only my opinion.
That's your definition, shit show?
Yeah, that's only my 36 years in martial arts and reading every single magazine that was ever out there, and now reading far too many articles. And Pinterest is my new thing. I didn't realize there was so much awfulness on Pinterest.
Okay, it's Nathan, we're going to give it to you before Mick opens up the Pinterest box here.
Thank you very much, Kurt. I really appreciate that.
That was about to be a nightmare.
Yeah, you better believe.
You guys know how quickly you can plan a wedding on Pinterest.
So to me, MMA is right now, obviously, there's been a lot of things during its development, but right now it is the full contact sport under the unified rules that we see usually taking place in a cage. 5-minute rounds, 10-point must system is very much a defined thing. I think the term is a little bit in the culture is a little bit more open for interpretation, in the same way that you said, your students might call what they do MMA. So I think it's in some ways it's a catch-all term to describe martial arts that are blended together or cross-training. For me, it's the sport, but I think it's covering bases where we don't actually have the terms for it, unfortunately. What about you?
As usual, what Nathan said. Simple enough. No, I mean, really, it's
why is it? It's never what Mick said. That's what
this is too. I don't like to gamble, man. No, it really. I mean, I think we see generic umbrella terms in the whole world of martial art all over the place. Karate isn't one thing that's an umbrella term. Kung Fu isn't one thing, it's an umbrella term. Eskrima isn't one thing that's an umbrella term or whatever. And then sometimes you go to a place and no, karate is this specific thing. That's what's on the sign. And so they're open up to interpretation in that way. I think MMA is that as well. We can use it as a generic umbrella term in the martial art world or everyday people looking at the martial art world from the outside. But it also is very specifically a specific thing. And it really shouldn't matter unless you're a consumer or you're a would-be student that's trying to figure out what school is most comfortable for you, for your child, for whatever it is. And then figure out, I don't know that I want to be in there really doing the blood and guts thing. I want to be doing this thing instead, and being able to make those distinctions. But otherwise, regarding the mainstream competitive full contact martial art thing that we have, genuinely, what Nathan said. I mean, that's undeniably, that's what it is.